I was in a hotel room in Sydney working away, preparing for a meeting, and I had ABC News 24 on in the background. And then suddenly I heard this voice, your voice. And I was just spellbound, watching and listening to the way you spoke, dealing with the most shocking, heartbreaking event less than 24 hours earlier. And I just watched it through. You walked back into your home. I rang my wife. I said, I think I've just seen the next Australian of the Year. And she went, what? So, Rosie, let's go back to that morning. I believe you had pretty much a house full of friends, supporters, colleagues, no doubt some emergency services people, and the media. And having been in the media, I can imagine there would have been wall-to-wall cameras waiting for someone to step out and say something.
I mean, I live in a semi-rural area. I have, nearly 3 acres, and those properties around me are similar. I'd got back from the police station, being interviewed all night, and I'd got back about 6 o'clock in the morning or something, and I remember kind of opening a bottle of wine with a couple of friends, and at some point I must have unconsciously fallen into bed. And when I woke up, the house was full of people who all, had needed to come together as they'd heard the news and just needed to be there, and which was wonderful for me because, there were people that had travelled for quite some time, that had known me for a very long time, and others that were local. And what I found was, as I was in deep shock, kind of coming in and out of awareness, I guess is how you describe it, is being like in a tunnel where you cannot absorb all of what's happened and your body's protecting you probably. Either that or it was the bottle of wine, I'm not sure. And I could hear them talking about the media and that somebody should go out there and ask them to go away or move on. And I guess in my complete stubbornness, because there's no other explanation, I was indignant that people were discussing how to handle a situation without actually asking me how to handle the situation. And people with very good intent do that to you. I guess they think you're either incapable or they need to shoulder the load and don't actually stop always and ask you, what are your wishes? And so out of indignation and stubbornness, I decided to walk out there, much to their concern, because I think everyone was concerned, like, the media is somebody to be fearful of. The media is someone that will manipulate and it's twist words. And so there was great fear around that. And so genuinely I went out to very respectfully ask them, with those lines of, thank you, I know you've got your job to do, but could you please respect my privacy and move on? And somehow there was a lot of media there, and some of them were very seasoned journalists who've been around for a very long time, and some were newer and more less experienced, but everybody there was greatly respectful and invited me to say a few words. And over time, over the last 10 years, I've met some of those journalists again, and that had a profound impact on their career, on their moment. And I've never regretted making that decision, but where it come from, how I chose those words, why I did it the way I did it, it was not intentional. It was obviously from myself, but there wasn't an agenda, there wasn't a plan, there was no idea that what I was about to say was something that would stop people in their tracks. So many people would remember.
And that was the start of your advocacy.
Yeah.
At that very moment.
Yeah.
And the journey to you ultimately becoming the Australian of the Year.
Yeah.
The process is, of course, someone has to nominate you. I can assure you there were many nominations for Rosie Batty for that award. And you had to go through the Victorian judging. So let's go back to Victoria, because you were at that point going through the inquest, the coronial inquest into Luke's death.
Yeah.
And you were coming from the court
Yeah.
direct to the presentation.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine how you were able to get through all of that and then incredibly accept the Victorian Australian.
It was such a bittersweet journey I've had. The most amazing experiences and the acknowledgements and many awards I've been given, because of the murder of my son. And I was very conflicted when I was won the Victorian, because I felt, how can I win this because my son was murdered? And they reassured me it's because of the way I reacted and what I've done, with that. It was because I will say the coronial inquest, although it's not supposed to be an adversarial process, let me tell you, I was the only witness that was there in that bloody witness box for 3 days, being grilled. Absolutely grilled. Talk about victim blaming, my goodness.
And this was about the court asking you or suggesting perhaps you could have done something more to protect you. Yeah.
So when I slammed my fist on the desk and used the F word, I don't know, that kind of took them aback a bit. But I had amazing support from the Federation of Community Legal Centres that Sharon Dev Singh was a man that is not a qualified lawyer, but he spends his life working with, and a lot of Aboriginal women as well, in that coronial system, which is a very dark place, giving voice to women's stories that otherwise would never, ever see the light of day. And they had come to me and said, we feel, this is the very early stages of Luke's murder. We feel this will be a very high-profile case and the opportunity to really challenge the systemic failings, and we'd really like to support you and work with you. So that coronial process really informed me deeply and really equipped me with, in ways that I will always, have, deeper appreciation and knowledge because of that. And I was very, very thankful to have their support because, nothing prepares you for what the system is going to do to you, even if you are the innocent party. I think, the journey ahead of you is you wouldn't wish on anybody. But knowing the degree of support I had, and feeling the sense of, human kindness, generosity, that's what gets you through, which really helps to restore faith and hope in humanity. So, I feel like I've seen the worst of what people are capable of, and I've seen much more so the overwhelming kindness and generosity and depth of spirit that we also have.
Let's fast forward from, I think it was October 2014 to January. So Australia Day Eve, 25th of January 2015. Before we go to Tony Abbott announcing your name, I just want to read some other names out. Robert Helpman, Yvonne Goolagong, Luicha O'Donoghue, John Farnham, Fred Hollows, Fiona Stanley, Tim Flannery, Jeffrey Rush, Ida Buttrose, Adam Goods, who preceded you.
Yeah.
Then this lady who no one's ever heard of called Rosie Batty.
You get this amazing award. All of Australia, you feel, is supporting your cause. You've got this amazing accolade and honour bestowed on you. But nobody tells you about the backlash that comes thick and fierce. And, I thought, wow.
Well, let's go there.
And, Adam Goods had to front up a football stadium.
Yeah.
And then the unconscious bias and blatant racism that we were in denial about for a very long time. Mine was behind the keyboards, and the only person who dared speak out was another bloody New South Wales person, Mark Latham, who I'm not sure he wouldn't be here either. So I feel fairly safe in being able to be disparaging about him as well.
But he made the most awful accusations about how you were using the award to your advantage.
Oh, yeah, benefiting financially. You know, I think it was so ludicrous what he was saying that I didn't have to say or do anything because people were so angry with his comments that you would see him being absolutely hard on. And I think, you know, that in all, you know, we joke, but those are the responses that are out there by misogynistic, bitter, angry, and dangerous members of the population, and including men. And, you know, how could anyone think, you know, and this was really a shock to me, how could anyone think I was in this for any other reason other than wanting to genuinely help towards raising awareness of family violence being the horrendous issue it is across our society, and making sure, as best as I possibly could, I maximised every opportunity to make sure that Luke didn't die in vain.
And you dedicated the award. I'll remember the words you used on the stage in front of Parliament. You dedicated the award to your beautiful son, Luke.
Yeah.
And, you didn't want him to die in vain. And I guess that was the start of the most incredible 12 months in your life, and one of the most incredible in mine, because I kind of was along for the ride.
Yeah.
You were doing all the hard work and the heavy lifting. And I think it's important to let people know, because Rosie came from a different place, all those names I read earlier, all those people had either teams, managers, a support base. Rosie had nothing. The only real person in your life had gone, and you had some friends, but even then you told me some of the people you thought were your closest friends disappeared.
One time, you know, I left school at 16 and couldn't get out of school quick enough, and then went back because I had the career aspirations of being a secretary. That was the pinnacle of my career aspiration, to serve men in the space of being a secretary. Things have changed, but you know, that gave me really strong administrative skills, typing skills, computer skills, and stuff like that. I was in sales and marketing and hadn't realised, I guess, that a lot of the communications that I had built and learnt through the roles that I had were also part of, I guess, what I was intuitively finding myself doing. I had done a diploma in community welfare, intending to go into the community services area. And so I had the theoretical understanding of family violence. I had been, you know, one of those people that said, well, women are violent too. And understanding that, you know, I guess in my, you know, discomfort at men being accused of perpetrating violence, it felt awkward and it felt uncomfortable, and does. So how do you convey that, you know, family violence is perpetrated by mostly men, and 94% of violence that occurs is perpetrated by men, and our evidence tells us that. So how do we continue to talk about this and challenge this social issue with men being part of the solution and part of the change, rather than alienating, shaming, and making, you know, discomfort? And it's not easy, it's not perfect, and it's an ongoing conversation that we continue to need to have. So 10 years later, I'm still saying the same things.
Last night, there were vigils held around the country, candlelight vigils for the 56 women to date this year, and the year's not over yet, who've died at the hands of a partner or someone they knew, males. And that must, I don't know how you would feel, because you used to say, I think you were the first to say, 1 woman a week dies.
Yeah, I did.
I remember that.
I haven't had much media training, but the small amount of media training I had, I remembered, and I've stuck to the same messages. And I have said for nearly 10 years, 1 woman a week will be murdered on average by a partner or previous partner. Mostly we are at risk at the time of planning to leave, leaving, all have, you know, and so I know that when a woman is murdered, she has either, there is some conflict there about her leaving, or, you know, something within that occasion. And the other statistic is 1 in 3 women will experience physical violence in their lifetime. And which is where we are more speaking more for children. 1 in 4 children are affected by family violence, either directly or indirectly, but are affected. And the children that are affected don't always continue to perpetrate violence or repeat the history, but there is a higher, you know, likelihood through those learnt behaviours, very sadly, that we find ourselves either in relationships where we're experiencing violence, as our parents did, or perpetrating violence. And so it is completely essential that for us to stop family violence, we need to be doing more with children, and hearing their voices, supporting them, having access to professional help. And we haven't, you know, it's been a battle for women to have a refuge or a place, or, you know, be able to reach out. And you know, previous generations of women were failed by police, were disbelieved by family, were shunned by neighbours, you know. So it's easy to think when I hear of another woman who's, you know, that's the worst that happens, is clearly, well, we believe it's the worst, but there are many, many women, based on their culture, based on their social isolation on many levels, that are living with and having to handle and manage violence that is, you know, we wouldn't want to even understand how that would feel. But people survive, live, and you know, and we still need to do so much more. So it's easy to think, what has changed? Have I done anything? Have I contributed in any way? And it's easy to feel that was a waste, you know. And what I will say, 10 years later, when I did speak to the media and I had the journey that I've had, I had no idea how long change absolutely takes. You know, and I can see the marches and the vigils and the anger and the frustration and the solidarity that comes from those important kind of displays of community cohesion. But those who've been involved in this for a long time, you know that change is not an overnight thing. It's a constant rub. And I know that no one begrudges me having to find some other avenues where my life has better balance. And, you know, and what can I continue to do in my own unique individual way to contribute to greater good? But I can't be that person in the media every day anymore. And I can't be that person doing a lot of the things. But, you know, that's where, you know, I guess change continues to be forced. But everyone that comes into this thinks they've discovered potentially a fault or a problem that they can contribute to fix. And then in time you realise that those problems and those have been known for a very long time. Yep. And organisations and people over decades have been working towards any incremental change. Yeah. And so it can be exhausting, it can be disheartening, but, you know, you get the inspiration from the people that you are working with. Yeah. You know, your colleagues. There are some amazing, and when I say amazing, I don't want to, there are some really well-intended and genuine, caring politicians. They're not all from the same cloth. Right. They, you know, I have really enjoyed working with and getting to know politicians, bureaucrats, public servants, you know, professionals within the family violence space. There are so many working unrelentingly on trying to make change, but change comes from each and every one of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message that is the hardest, is what can we do? And recognising that, we all play a part.
I remember, Rosie, the morning after the big announcement, we had an early start. We were at Parliament at 6 o'clock.
God. Yeah. That day nearly killed me, Jeremy.
No, that was day one.
No, but we didn't just get up at what unearthly time it was to face the media after, the big night the night before. He then had me flying down to Melbourne to the tennis. And then we went back up to Sydney to the cricket.
I think one of the first questions Rosie was asked, she said she hadn't had a lot of media training, but she handled this so beautifully. You might recall that in his wisdom, Tony Abbott decided to give a knighthood.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so they wanted Rosie's reaction as the new Australian of the Year to Prince Philip being knighted.
Yeah.
And Rosie went, oh, well, whatever. I'm the Australian of the Year. I'd prefer to talk to, because she was aware. Rosie was well aware.
I was aware. He actually rang me first thing in the morning and said, I am really sorry. The headlines are all about me and this, and it shouldn't be. It's detracting from your award. And I think, no, I'm having as much attention as I can deal with, thank you. Quite happy for you to be copying this. But what a ridiculous thing to do, I have to say.
But that started a year that took you all over Australia. You probably lost count of the number of addresses you gave and interviews you were doing.
That year I did 250 engagements.
Wow.
250 engagements. That did not include important meetings with prime ministers, premiers, leading politicians, etc., and bureaucrats. That did not include media interviews. So you can imagine that every single day there was a multitude of people to speak to. And I couldn't say no, because I felt that my moment in time couldn't be guaranteed how long it would last.
We said when Rosie got the award, you can do with this award like Geoffrey Rush did, which was bugger all. He just took the award and thank you very much.
Yeah.
See you next year when we hand it over to someone else. But Rosie decided...
He was probably trying to get out of the country before that other thing blew up. That's another one, isn't it? So these men. Sorry, men in the room.
No, but Rosie, you said you didn't say no to anyone, and that overwhelmed you to some extent.
Yeah. I did say no. Oh. I did say no. You did give good advice. You said, be really clear on your subject of expertise. So unless it was anything relating to family violence, I didn't get swayed into giving opinion or interviews or comments about anything else. The only thing I really did perhaps deviate from that on occasion was asylum seekers and our treatment in that area, where I lent my support to some things that were happening. And there was no way I could have attended every single event. There were thousands of invitations to speak. But what it meant was I didn't have a support team. So that quickly had to kind of somehow work out who was going to do that. And that became someone, that initially was my kind of work, where I was triaging emails from dawn till dusk, 7 days a week, to the point I'd go blurred in front of my computer because I couldn't keep doing it. And I wanted to do local community events, and so they had a balance of what was I saying yes to, and it was lots of different types of things that weren't just, high profile things. It was also, whether it was a local women's group or whatever, I wanted always my connection to local community people, whether it was Zonta or the Seroptimists or Rotary or and a myriad of other groups. So, those things were difficult to say no to. In fact, in one way it gets easier, in one way it gets harder. Because all those years ago, I'd think, well, nobody expects me to be able to speak. So if I drop the ball and burst into tears and run off stage, people go, oh, that poor woman. Whereas now they go, oh, let's hire Rosie Batty. She's a fabulous speaker. And I go, oh, God. So the imposter the imposter syndrome never leaves you. And that's what happened to me when I was Australian of the Year. I just was so overwhelmed. I really didn't feel worthy. There were many people, even with the cohort of people that were up for the award at the same time as me, who'd done a lot more over, I felt a lot more over a period of time. And, I could really struggle to see that it was, I was deserving. And so, like a lot of things, I overcompensated because I was so frightened of failing. And so many people were so absolutely ecstatic that I had won.
Absolutely.
And, that hope that they put on my shoulders unintentionally without any pressure. I would say no one at the Australian of the Year Awards are forcing me to do anything. This is me. Those words that, are said, you can do with the award. You can use it as you can accept it as an award, or you can make it a role, I think, and that's what I chose to do.
Well, you shook things up. You still are. In your book, the question is posed, after tragedy, how do we find hope? When Luke died, it felt like you'd lost all hope. How did you get to the point where you felt you're ready to be hopeful about what life had in store for you?
Maybe you've always got it in you in a way that sometimes perhaps other people have either lost or find it difficult to find. And, being asked these questions all the time over years, it's helped me really understand the importance of the way I was raised, the influence of key members of my family that demonstrated resourcefulness, resilience, strength, stoicism even, that's a British trait. Very stoic, but not necessarily emotionally available. Maybe that served, me well. But I lost my mum when I was 6. She died suddenly and unexpectedly and shouldn't have died, and apparently it was medical neglect. But at that time, again, and maybe that's where my reaction of stubbornness kicked in when Luke was murdered, was back then children were seen, not heard. To protect children, you didn't tell them things. So we weren't aware that she died. We didn't go to the funeral. And it's not that my dad didn't care and other people, they thought they were doing the right thing by us. Now I would say that is really not the right way to involve children in the grieving process. And so I guess, learning that as a little girl was very, very hard and changed the trajectory of my life, I know, for the rest of my life, because trauma, we use that term probably a little bit too readily now, because I think we still need to really deeply understand the effects of trauma and how so many of us are impacted in some different, many different ways. So there's a greater appreciation of trauma, but let's not overuse that term and say, oh, that traumatised me, when really all it did was kind of irritate me. Yeah. Because really, what I have understood is my journey through, and when I was Australian of the Year, I guess what I hadn't understood was the impacts of PTSD and trauma and all of that were going to kick in later. And inevitably they did. And I was in public eye. I thought I was dealing with things, and then I'd have meltdowns and extreme reactions, which, as you said, some people withdrew from. My neighbours still don't speak to me. And I was deeply ashamed, and I felt a fraud. How could I be on this stage with people putting me on this platform and saying I was such a wonderful person, and meanwhile I was having a meltdown because over nothing, it seemed, about with somebody that unfortunately may have just said something that got an extreme reaction that was at any other day or time or would never have happened. So, I've realised that those things kind of come.
Impact, yeah.
And so I guess, you know, now I understand the triggers better. Now I manage my life with better balance. I understand the things that make me anxious. And you know, and unfortunately, you know, that was several years in that I was able or forced to take that time out. And, you know, people would say, you know, Australian of the Year, and I go, and somebody said to me, and her name was Frida Briggs, and I believe she won the Senior Australian of the Year, and she said, Rosie, it doesn't stop after a year. And I thought, oh, fuck. So she said, oh, it goes on. And I was thinking, oh, my God. So, you know, it was 3 years that I worked at a similar pace. So the first year was literally...
frenetic.
And then the next year was 180. And by that point, I went further afield. I went into more regional areas, Broken Hill, Mount Isa, Kalgoorlie. It was really important. I went to Norfolk Island, where they didn't think it existed, except some people knew it did. Fiji, Papua New Guinea. You know, so I've really tried, and visiting remote Aboriginal communities.
You've more than tried. Can we swap your coffee cup for a book? I'd just love you to read a little extract. This is right at the end of this wonderful book, a great collaboration between Rosie and Sue.
I knew my anxiety and constant imposter syndrome and fears of failure and not being good enough would never let me write my own book. So the choice and opportunity to write with somebody like Sue Smethurst was an amazing opportunity and honour, but I tested her, I can tell you that. Because they're working with you on a book, and I'd say, I never said that. And she said, yes, you did. Here's the quote. And it was on this date in this article. I thought, oh, well, I'd probably say it differently now. But she really has created and brought together this book. And the process wasn't necessarily cathartic in some ways, but what I wanted to honestly share was some of the things I've talked about this morning, which is the conflict, that no one is perfect. No one is the pedestal person that we put them up as being. And I wanted ordinary people to know that ordinary people can do amazing things. But we can't do it alone. We need people around us, our families, our friends. I'm starting to cry before I've even read this passage. But by the time we got to the end of the book, you know, and how it ends is really how I felt. So I'll try and read it without making you all cry as well. By the time you're reading this, I will have just passed the 10-year anniversary of Luke's death. It's a date I dread. How will I mark it? Who knows? I know that day will be difficult, as will the weeks leading up to it. I know that I will have moments where I'm not myself, where I'm perhaps short with others, where I'm quiet or introverted, and that's okay. For a long time, my life was utterly overwhelming as I wrestled to keep on top of my day-to-day existence. Finding contentment and mindfulness has not been easy, but it's achievable, and they are precious mental assets. I know when I need to slow down, breathe, and above all else, be kind to myself. I'm trying to tip the scales in favour of being more generous in spirit and kindness and support. I want to be more thoughtful, more compassionate. I want to nurture more of these qualities I have, the qualities that made me the best mother and friend to Luke that I could be. I want that part of me to be more, so there is less room for negativity and self-doubt. Life is a precious and wondrous thing, and we should make the most of every day. When I accepted the honour of becoming Australian of the Year, I said that Luke did not die in vain and will not be forgotten. I said he was beside me and with me every step of the way, and he is. Luke is with me, he guides me, he inspires me, and sometimes he carries me. Similarly, Australians have lifted me up and carried me when I've needed them to. And when I've least expected it, the courage, friendship, and grace of others, often from complete strangers, has given me strength and hope to continue moving forward and find meaning and light in my life. Thank you for walking beside me, for carrying me when I needed it, for lifting me up when I least expected it, and for allowing me to honour my son with the strength of a nation's love supporting me. I felt it. I feel it. You've given me hope.
Thanks, Rosie.
This conversation was recorded by Two Heads Media for True Story. Thanks to co-curators Sarah Nicholson and Genevieve Swart, and to the Illawarra Flame for ongoing support. The festival is held every spring in November, and we hope to see you there next time. For more information about the festival programme and other events, go to southcoastwriters.org.